Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live News. Not a lot of racing to discuss, but definitely a lot of news. This is the final broadcast for our Saturday show for the 2020 year. Of course, definitely we're going to be taking a small holiday break during the holiday season. We definitely encourage everyone to enjoy the holiday week, as well as we're going to be having a new episode of Life on the Grid coming up. With me, Kobe Lambert from the Podium Finish. We got a lot of news to discuss, including Formula One news, W Series. We'll start with the growing calls on Nikita Mazepin to not be in Formula One.
On Tuesday, December 9th, we reported on the Nikita Mazepin situation, and while on the air, new developments emerged about the case, and since then, even more details have developed, including a response from the FIM Formula One, and even more after that from this past Thursday. And here's a timeline of the events, and we're doing this to give an accurate timeline of the facts, since a lot has occurred since we last reported on this story on Wednesday. On the Wednesday, and on Tuesday. Oh, and I'm sorry about that. I think I misspoke. But on Tuesday, December 8th, not 9th. There was a video on Nikita Mazepin's Instagram story of him groping a woman, and in the video, the woman puts his hand away, and it appeared to be non-consensual. And the video was deleted, but had already been saved and started circulating on the internet. And then on December 9th, Haas condemned the actions, calling it abhorrent and would handle the situation internally. And Nikita Mazepin ended up posting an apology, said that he'll learn and be a better Formula One driver. Joe, what do you think of Nikita's apology?
Nikita's apology did not seem at all as sincere as other apologies we have seen for other circumstances. I know in the past, I've compared it to Kyle Larson's apology. When Kyle Larson apologized, it was on video. You could see the expression on his face. He said what he said, and the apology, it's still up on his Twitter profile. Yes, he deleted his Twitter profile for a while, deactivated it, but when it came back, the apology is still there. I think that's a really good thing with social media. In case we get a new fan in motorsports, oh, I like this Kyle Larson guy. You know what he did 3 years ago? No, he said this. And then they could see the apology he delivered and the course of action he's done since then. For Nikita, this apology just typed out, screenshotted, posted, and to say, I need to be a better Formula One driver, it really felt like this was not sincere at all, and definitely something where I feel, Nikita either missed the mark or doesn't understand the severity of his actions.
Yeah. I mean, the apology. So, just a little note apology. I think anybody could do something like that. It didn't seem like there was a lot of effort put into that. So I definitely agree with you. I don't really think Nikita understands the situation that he's in now, or realize what he's done. And it was really interesting that he ended up deleting that apology. Something we'll get into in a little bit, but it's definitely not a good apology from Nikita, and a lot of people did end up criticizing him for this. And since then, we've seen the hashtag "We Say No to Mazepin" begin to circulate around social media, and an online petition was set up to remove Mazepin from Haas and F1 altogether, but no response from the FIA or Formula One besides Haas at this point. And at the time of this video, the petition just passed 40,000 signatures, with 50,000 been the next goal. Remarkable, just absolutely remarkable. People are really upset, and they're exercising their rights to have their voices heard. And then on Wednesday, a post from the victim stated that she and Mazepin were close friends, and that the video of them that we all saw, they were just playing around, messing around as just friends, and Nikita didn't mean any harm. And then the FIM Formula One issued a statement saying that they were pleased with how Haas responded and was handling the situation. And then during the Formula One race weekend at Abu Dhabi, Mazepin was nowhere in sight, and we all thought he was going to be there to test with Mercedes. But Toto Wolff said that the reason why he wasn't testing with the team had nothing to do with his actions. Instead, at Mercedes, we saw their Formula E drivers Stoffel Van Dorn and Nick de Vries getting some testing time, and no other team or driver have made any comments about Mazepin. And on December 15th, Gunther Steiner of Haas F1 said he'll be objective in the investigation. The matter will be investigated and kept private. And this is an example of an employer investigating an employee, and there are certain HR protections that are in place. And this week, the hashtag We Say No to Mazepin has continued to circulate and started to trend on Twitter. The online petition has been collecting more signatures, as I mentioned. Plus, victims of sexual assault and sexual harassment in the motorsports community have been sharing their stories. And Nikita Mazepin's actions have sadly brought back some of those traumatic memories to those victims. And to all those victims, on behalf of Everyone Grit Network, we stand by and support you all as we've listened to you share your harrowing stories. And on December 16th, the victim posted on her Instagram story series of posts, and one said, I quote, "Protect drunk girls." Then another post stated, and I quote once again, "Don't let anyone touch you or disrespect you." And then the final post said, I quote one final time, "Don't drink too much tequila in yacht Dubai party." And and these posts really invalidated the earlier posts of her and Nikita being friends and just messing around. And on December 17th, the apology he had posted was deleted, and this led to an increase of calls to have him removed from the Haas F1 team and no place in Formula One altogether. And this is when we really start to see influential Formula One content creators and media folks such as Matt Gallagher from WTF1 and Beth from Beth F1, a female YouTube content creator, and others call for Nikita to be terminated. And since then, Nikita Mazepin has actually deleted all tweets on his account. And as of this morning, we don't have any further updates from Haas, Formula One, or Nikita Mazepin himself. Also, no Formula One driver team besides Haas has made a single comment about the situation. Considering everything that has developed surrounding this troubling story, is termination of Nikita Mazepin at Haas the only solution left?
Yes, I would say it is the only reasonable solution left. Anything less will be a big disservice, unjust action that's going to really reflect poorly on Formula One and the motorsports industry. Essentially, you're saying that this driver who has personal connections to a lot of money that's going to help this team is a little bit above more the law to where they could get away with such a heinous act. Everything he has done has really not shown anything that prove he is sincerely apologetic and remorseful of what he did. Deleting his apology, deleting all his tweets. Now the questions about the sincerity of the victims posting their friends, and then to be invalidated with those following posts from her. This really raises a lot of red flags, and anything less than termination, I feel, would just really could potentially turn off the fan base and just hurt the reputation of Formula One, the FIA, and in general motorsports. Because if he was to have a solid race, his name is there. That's just gonna be something where, for the victims of sexual assault, sexual harassment, a turnoff to the sport, and it's just gonna look really bad for the sport in general.
Yeah, and for starters, I'm gonna say I do understand the business side of the sport when it comes to Haas F1, because Haas needs the funding from Nikita Mazepin and his father Dmitry Mazepin, who's a Russian billionaire, and we all know Haas has been really struggling with money, and this fight and this sponsorship from Mazepin's father is really going to help their team, and I do understand from that perspective why they might not want to get rid of Mazepin, but honestly, Joe, when you're thinking about it from a human standpoint, it should be an easy decision here. When somebody does something so serious like this, I think termination is really the only solution here, as I mentioned. But I'm afraid that something like this is not going to happen because of the circumstances I mentioned with Haas F1 needing the sponsorship money to fund their Formula One program. And if they were to drop Mazepin, I don't know where the team would go with here. Could we potentially see the team fold? I'm not really sure about that. But if Haas was decided to cut Nikita Mazepin from his driver lineup next year, then that'd be in a really difficult situation unless they were able to find another funded driver. And and I think on our last program we were talking about this, and with Mazepin, when you bring a driver who's well funded like that, you're able to have a highly talented pilot like Mick Schumacher. And if they were to terminate Nikita Mazepin, I don't know what that would mean for Mick Schumacher. I don't know if they would if he would lose his ride as well because they wouldn't be able to fund it or something like that. But but losing Nikita Mazepin would be a major loss for Haas. But speaking from a human standpoint, termination is really the only solution here in this situation. And thinking about other incidents that happened in motorsports, we all remember what happened to Santino Ferrucci over in Formula Two. And everything he did, and they didn't hesitate kicking him out of Formula Two, which ultimately ended his path to going to Formula One. Yeah, and they handled that situation swiftly, and Santino was punished for it. And then this situation, it seems like they're not taking the same stance here in trying to do what's morally right. Yeah, like I said, I do understand the business side, but here, I think I think morals should go above business. Do you agree with that, Joe?
Definitely. I mean, this is something where this is such a heinous act. I mean, put it this way: replace Haas Formula One with any private business, accounting firm, any business. They hire a new employee about months before that new employee is to start, post this Instagram, all this, that employee will be terminated with no questions asked. This situation, of course, as you mentioned, the complexity of the businesses involved, it's really unfortunate. It really sends the wrong message that Nikita Mazepin is more above the law than just an average employee.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with you there. And we all know that no matter what anyone thinks, Nikita or even himself, Nikita Mazepin in this situation, he's not above the law. Nobody is above the law. And considering the situation, I think he definitely needs to be dealt with because what he did was not acceptable at all by any means. And if Haas F1 decided to avoid terminating Nikita Mazepin, but says they did some action in private, do you think the public has a right to know what they did, and should that satisfy the many concerns about Mazepin?
If Haas F1 was to say that they took action, but they're keeping it private, it is a company too where, other commercial businesses, private business, they could take action to an employee and they don't have to disclose that. In the United States, there are certain protections for human HR personnel rights. But the seriousness of this situation with Nikita Mazepin, what he did, and then the very public nature of his work. He isn't just an employee that's in a cubicle all day. He is the face of this company. He is the face of F1, especially when Formula One goes to the Russian Grand Prix in Russia, his home country. His face is going to be everywhere. Don't see it where anything less than termination is a good solution. Even they say, oh, yeah, we punish him, but we can't disclose that because that's HR employer relations, confidential. I find that still unacceptable, and I think most people will as well.
Yeah, it's definitely unacceptable. And I think the thing that's really key here is Haas having transparency. Yeah, and they do have the right to take action behind the scenes and not have anybody know about it. But I think being transparent would be really important here. Tell the public what you did to discipline him, because if you have a lack of transparency, there's just going to be more questions developing over time. Yeah, I mean you can say publicly we're going to handle this in private, but but with this situation, is is not good for for anyone involved. And next, Joe, do you think it's concerning that no team nor driver, not even Lewis Hamilton, has said anything about this still?
Yes, it's very concerning, especially as they're just sitting silently. It's almost like one of the old things I remember: silence is consent. To just be quiet about it, I understand. It's one of those things where this is a team, a Haas problem. Don't necessarily just want to just step in, but the evidence is becoming more and more clear. Like we know what the problem is, and especially when we talk about, we want to make the world a better place. Here is a fine example where Formula One could right away say, okay, we're making the world and the sport a better place. And it starts with this. This is unacceptable. But everyone's quiet. I could understand there's always that notion you don't want to be the first one to speak out, especially since you're a driver, you're going to be racing against this driver, and there's all sorts of complications with businesses. But still, it's very concerning that every driver have been quiet about it. Every team has been quiet about it. The fact that Mercedes said, the reason why Nikita wasn't there was not related to his actions. Does that mean he would have still tested if the things that didn't occur didn't happen and he was still available to test? It raises a lot of questions about Formula One.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, Joe, I hate that I even have to say this, but I'm not surprised at all that we haven't seen any teams or drivers issue a statement or anything about this incident. It seems like it's more of, yeah, like you say, more of a Haas problem. So it seems like these teams and drivers are like, since that's a Haas problem, it's not my problem either. And I do understand why they wouldn't touch the situation at all. It's a very sensitive, touchy situation. It's very, very serious. And I know we're getting a little bit. We're going to get into the Formula One initiative. We races one, and I do think that Haas is under a lot of pressure now. And if they don't do anything to discipline Nikita, I think most people believe that that Nikita's actions were so severe that he should be fired from the team and not even race in Formula One because of this. And I do think it would be very powerful if we. I know this is probably not going to happen for obvious reasons, but if we had drivers like say Lewis Hamilton take to social media and acknowledge Nikita's action, be like, "This is wrong," and say that I will not compete with somebody like this on the racetrack. And if we have like say driver like Sebastian Vettel, Dan, Daniel Ricciardo, Charles Leclerc, George Russell, Nicholas Latifi, all those drivers in Formula One, if we had them come out post statements and and saying that we don't need to have someone like that in our sport, and if he's allowed to race, we don't race at all. I think that would send a strong, powerful message to Haas F1 and everyone else who's remaining silent about this. Yeah, so I think if that were to happen, that would go a long way to forcing Haas to act because they can only stay quiet about this situation for so long. And I think over time, as the team continues to stay silent, the cries about the situation is just going to get louder and louder and louder until it's going to be so impossible for you to ignore. And with that said, if Formula One allows Mazepin to race and Haas decides to keep him, how detrimental would this be to the Formula One image and the initiative we race as one?
The we race as one, if it already became sort of a joke after the FIA investigated Lewis Hamilton for his T-shirt, if Nikita was to still race, they might as well just scrap the We Race as One campaign because it really is nothing more than a slogan to Formula One at this point. It's We Race as One, but if Lewis wants to bring up a case that spurred the Black Lives Matter movement, the push for equality against racism, if they're going to investigate for him wearing a shirt that brought up that case, but not Nikita Mazepin saying that's a Haas issue and we're just going to allow him to race. The We Race as One is just nothing more but a slogan to put on T-shirts, sell, and really they should just then at that point get rid of it. And it's just really compare Formula One to other motorsports series. A lot of times Formula One is not exactly the most fan-friendly sport. We report on how NASCAR is one of the top brands with Gen Z, young adults. Formula One's not on that list. In fact, none of the sponsors on that list are involved with Formula One. This isn't going to help Formula One at all, bring fans, especially female fans. And if you have a company like NASCAR, which has shown its history of, they acted swiftly when Kyle Larson did what he did at Monza Madness. When there was allegation of Kurt Busch abusing his girlfriend, NASCAR suspended him during just the allegation stages. People are going to say, hey, you know what? NASCAR cares more about what their drivers do on and off the track. They hold their drivers accountable. Formula One doesn't. I'm going to go with NASCAR. So this is going to be detrimental to Formula One if they allow him to race.
Yeah, you did bring up a good point there about Kurt Busch. Stewart Haas Racing, when he was competing with them, they suspended him during the allegation stage, and they acted very swiftly, and they didn't wait at all to decide to suspend Kurt Busch. And I think they suspended him right before the Daytona 500. If I'm not mistaken, NASCAR's biggest race, and that was huge. Because that was, like you mentioned, that was during the allegations phase of the situation, and it was really good that Stewart Haas Racing and NASCAR acted so swiftly like that. And that's exactly how situations like this should be done. And I do agree, it's going to be extremely detrimental to Formula One image and Races One initiative. I know I took to Twitter and I questioned this whole situation. I said if something's not done here, then We Races One is an absolute joke. And you said it best, Joe. It's just a slogan at this point. Doesn't really have any meaning to it, because if we truly Races One, you're going to stand up for all in what Nikita Mazepin did to the poor woman in the video, and then to see the aftermath of her post on her Instagram story, it really shows that what was said at first, about just friends playing around, that probably wasn't the case at all. It seems like she's really hurting from this situation, and hopefully in the end, justice will be served.
Yeah, hopefully at the end, justice will be served. This is definitely a story, of course, we're going to be following with more updates as they occur as well. Of course, one of the big things we've been following, and yesterday came down the biggest piece in the Formula One silly season, Sergio Perez. He will be racing in Red Bull in 2021. That was announced yesterday. Definitely, of course, got a huge reaction on social media. People are really excited about that. Same time, though, gotta talk about Alex Albon. He is relegated down to the reserve driver role in 2021. A lot of Alex Albon fans, of course, expressing the frustration he wasn't given a fair chance, and a lot of people hoping the best for Alex Albon and seeing him again in Formula One. A lot of questions, though. Sergio Perez, it's a one-year deal, so many are believing this could be a possibility for Alex Albon, or if possible, Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri to maybe go up to Red Bull by 2022. Now, as I mentioned about Alex Albon fans criticizing this move, you gotta look at the history of Red Bull lately. Daniel Ricciardo left Red Bull for Renault after the 2018 season. Pierre Gasly comes to Red Bull, gets promoted during the season. Albon is put in place. Alex Albon, after this season, her full season with Red Bull, dropped to the reserve role. Sergio Perez will be the fourth different teammate to start the season with Max Verstappen in 4 years. Is Sergio Perez the teammate that could really support Max and bring Red Bull closer to a championship?
Wow, 4 different teammates in 4 years. That's a lot of turnover within one team. And I do think that, considering his history, Sergio Perez has been a really consistent driver, and I think he'll be able to help Red Bull get the point that they need to be more competitive in the constructor standings, that unfortunately Alex Albon wasn't able to do, especially with his inconsistency. And this partnership of Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez is going to be really interesting, because recently, minus Daniel Ricciardo, really, we haven't really like gone in knowing what the driver was capable of alongside Max Verstappen. And since Sergio Perez is a seasoned veteran in Formula One, we know what Sergio Perez is capable of, and it was remarkable what he was able to do at the secure Grand Prix in Bahrain to win his very first Formula One Grand Prix. And we know, given the car, Sergio Perez can contend and be competitive, and now he's going to be a potentially race winning car at Red Bull, and I think it could definitely bring Red Bull a little bit closer to being more competitive for the constructors championship. And it's going to be really interesting to see how Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen get along as teammates.
Yeah, that's the big thing. How would they get along with teammates? Perez coming off a win. I mean, up until the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, him and Max both have one win each. The Sergio Perez is going to bring a lot of experience from his driving days with Sauber. McLaren, then Force India, Racing Point. Definitely, I think he's going to be a contender. He should definitely be up to pace. The big thing, of course, he's going to have Max Verstappen. A lot of people assume Max is going to be the number one driver. So definitely, we want to hear from you, the viewers. Tell us in the chat room. We'd love to share your opinions, your thoughts, and questions on the air. Because here's the big one: with Sergio Perez coming off a career best season, can he be the biggest threat to Max number one status at Red Bull?
I think the jury is still out on that. I think we're gonna have to wait and see how the first half of the season. Well, not just the first half, just the first few races, and see how that goes. Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez being teammates. I think Sergio is gonna be a lot closer to Max than Alex Albon or Pierre Gasly ever were. And if Perez starts getting the best of Max Verstappen, I think that could definitely lead to some internal turmoil in the team because Red Bull at the moment is Max Verstappen's team and the car is built towards Max Verstappen's strengths. And we all know that second car at Red Bull, it seems like something's really been off there. And like I said, since we know what Sergio Perez is capable of behind the wheel, if Perez comes in and really struggles at Red Bull, kind of like we saw with Pierre Gasly and Alex Albon, and then there's going to be a lot more questions. People are going to be wondering if a driver like Sergio Perez, who has a ton of experience in Formula One, and everything that he's been able to do throughout his Formula One career, people are gonna start wondering. They say maybe Pierre Gasly and Alex Albon, maybe it wasn't their fault at all. Maybe it's just Red Bull focusing too much on Max and making him the top dog there instead of instead of give and take. So both drivers can be able to get the most out of that car instead of just focusing solely on Max. And if Sergio does the best he can and still unable to do well, and if it's the same old as Gasly and Albon, then maybe it's the team and car not not focusing too much on the second driver.
Bring up a good point, especially with the big thing that first half of the season. Sergio Perez, we know Australia, the first race of the season. A lot of times we see unpredictable finishes, especially with reliability, first corner mayhem. Sergio Perez could finish ahead of Max Verstappen in that race. I could already see people questioning if this is going to challenge Max Verstappen's status as a number one driver. Max Verstappen has had that easily the last 3 years. Sergio Perez, after Australia, if he's ahead of Max and again, so on, it could really change the dynamic of that team. Now, we do have a question from one of the people in the chat room. Why do you think Max is not supporting Albon in this 2020 season to help him build his confidence? Definitely want to give a big thank you. Encourage everyone in the chat room, share your opinions, questions with us. Kobe, do you see where this was a situation where Max Verstappen could have been a better teammate, not only to help his teammate, Alex Albon, but also Red Bull improve?
Hmm. Well, with this situation, obviously we don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but it would definitely be interesting if Max Verstappen were to come out publicly and defend Alex Albon, said, and try to help build his confidence publicly while we don't know what goes on privately. It really seems like this Formula One mindset is all about me. It's all about me. And you do have to be selfish in Formula One if you want to be successful. You can't always be looking out for everyone else like this. And that's just been the culture of Formula One for many decades, and that will yeah, we're starting to see it become a little bit more friendly between the drivers. But at the end of the day, since Formula One is the pinnacle of motorsport, there's only 20 drivers get to say each year that they're Formula One drivers, unless unprecedented circumstances like this year with the pandemic, where we saw Nico Hulkenberg make a shock return. I believe it was for two. Yeah, it was supposed to be for three, but he didn't get to start one, so got to compete and finish in two races this year. Yeah, your Formula One pinnacle of motorsport. You need to make sure that you're doing what you can to be successful. You can't be worried about your teammate like Max Verstappen, your teammate Alex Albon, who's having all sorts of problems. In the other garage stall right beside you. You have to focus on the task at hand. What's going on with your situation? You can't spend too much time worrying about Alex Albon. And I know that sounds bad to say, but we all know Formula One can be a cutthroat business.
Yeah, that's the thing. Compare Formula One to IndyCar, NASCAR, where a lot of times the drivers will be sharing notes, the crew chiefs are sharing notes, talking about helping the rookie teammate out. Max Verstappen, definitely this is a case where in Formula One, your number one rival is your teammate. And it's going to be really interesting with Sergio Perez coming in that role. Sergio Perez, after a great season in this car, he really wants to go out there and prove his case that he is worthy of a top ride. That's going to get really harder in the coming years in Formula One. But definitely, I see Perez where he's going to go out there. He's going to do everything he can to push Max Verstappen more. Max Verstappen, I don't think is going to exactly be thrilled to have such a tough number two driver, but that is just part of Formula One. And of course, a lot of people got to be asking themselves this question too: is Max Verstappen really the best driver for Red Bull as well? Because year after year, he always seems to have these mistakes here and there and can't close the deal. But of course, Mercedes have been too hard to beat, and it looks like Mercedes will continue to be hard to beat in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Mercedes gonna be. Yeah, definitely. Mercedes gonna be hard to beat. Yeah, yeah, and that's also a good point there. Max Verstappen as well. Max does make mistakes on the track, and people seem to ignore that for some odd reason. And if we're being fair here, we actually need to question Max Verstappen too. Yeah, so I don't think it's always all on the second driver. Since we know this is Max's team at Red Bull, and we do need to. I think everyone does need to start questioning his abilities behind the wheel too, because Max has made mistakes as you mentioned. And going back to what you were saying about Mercedes, they had some big news break on Friday that they were going to be keeping Toto Wolff for 3 more seasons, and Toto's been the team principal at Mercedes, and this move may indicate that a potential contract for Lewis Hamilton is on the horizon, and I guess it's very likely it could be a 3-year deal for Lewis Hamilton to carry him and Toto together since they've had a really successful partnership. And many are now assuming that Valtteri Bottas will likely be replaced by George Russell at the end of the 2021 season. Is it safe to assume that Lewis Hamilton will be racing another 3 years given the Toto Wolff contract extension, and also that George Russell will eventually replace Valtteri Bottas and he'll be driving alongside Lewis Hamilton in 2022?
It is a very safe assumption to make. All the signs are showing this is the route that Mercedes is taking. He got Toto Wolff for 3 years. Lewis Hamilton, I see him doing another 3 years. We know 2021, he's easily the favorite to win a championship. 2022, yes, that is the big year of the new regulations and the new package. I wouldn't be surprised if Mercedes will still act and be the favorite that year. We may have a surprise increase in competition, maybe some surprise winners, but I still think Mercedes is going to be hard to beat. And by 2023, the final year, I see that where if Lewis Hamilton, if he's still competitive or he didn't get the championship 2022, but still competitive, he might say, hey, 2023, yes, that'll be my final year in F1. I'll step aside. When it comes to Bottas, 1-year contract, I see it where after what he did at the almost oval at Bahrain, George Russell, he is primed for that seat in 2022. And I think all the signs are really showing, especially with this. I don't see George Russell waiting 3 more years in Williams. I see him in a Mercedes in 2022.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. All the signs are in place. And we've mentioned on our previous programs that it seems like Mercedes never truly wants to commit to Valtteri Bottas long term, like they'd be willing to with Lewis Hamilton. And we've known that Valtteri Bottas has been referenced as Lewis Hamilton's wingman, and it seems like he's certainly the lower man on the totem pole at Mercedes. And then George Russell to do what he did to come in and be extremely competitive. And I remember that bold move he made on Valtteri Bottas at the Bahrain almost oval. That was really bold. And it was crazy how fast George Russell was to Valtteri Bottas in a car that Bottas knows well, in a car that he knew way better than George Russell did during this time when Russell had to replace Lewis Hamilton at this race. And I don't know how much longer we're going to see Lewis racing, but I think it's safe to assume that Lewis is going to be with us several more years before he decides to hang up the helmet in Formula One. And I do agree that 2021 might be the last year we'll see Valtteri Bottas driving that Mercedes because George Russell is way too good to continue, being a back marker. Because when he jumped in that Mercedes, he showed everyone what we already knew from his domination in the junior categories. We knew that George Russell was capable of going out there performing that way, and we know that he can win multiple Grand Prix throughout his career and maybe become a Formula One world champion.
Definitely potential to be a Formula One world champion. And just like how we mentioned, Sergio Perez could be a big threat to Max Verstappen. George Russell, 2022, I could see him being a big threat to Lewis Hamilton's number one status. Of course, he'll be a multiple time champion versus rookie, but at that fast pace he showed, definitely he could bring a big battle to Mercedes between the two drivers. One of the big things, of course, we're going to be seeing more Formula One battles at Interlagos Thursday. Formula One announced that Interlagos will be on the Formula One calendar next year. Of course, this year the race did not happen due to the pandemic. The good news, we're not just going to Interlagos just for 2021. This deal is in place to last to 2025. So we're going to have many more years of race at Interlagos. Many online celebrate the news as this venue has produced great races, passionate fans, a favorite amongst drivers. Still, there are many concerns about the future of this track, especially with a new track being proposed and a new name, the Brazilian Grand Prix, going to be changing venues. Can Formula One have two races in Brazil in a single season? Or is this move just delaying the removal of Interlagos eventually?
I do find it really interesting that they're changing the name from the Brazilian Grand Prix to the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, and maybe that'll indicate that they're going to have two races in Brazil, like you mentioned, down the road. And I'm sure it was a huge win, obviously, for Formula One fans that are going to stay at Interlagos for the foreseeable future, and also a huge win for all of the environmental activists out there who have been strongly protesting and building a new circuit, tearing down the rainforest down in Brazil. They're already tearing down so many trees, and a lot of people felt that was really harming the environment and the climate, climate as well. And maybe this might be delaying the move because with that pandemic and everything going on, Formula One wasn't able to get everything set up for this new venue in Brazil in the future. And it's certainly an interesting situation here. We're just gonna have to wait and see what happens. But definitely a lot of Formula One fans can breathe a sigh of relief that their Interlagos circuit is going to stay for the foreseeable future. But after 2025, who knows what's gonna happen?
Yeah, 2025 is a long ways. Of course, if they start really ramping up the construction for the new venue, we'll start getting more indicators. But after 2021, do we see venues appear on the calendar even for a few seasons or on a rotating base, especially after this year, where we saw Mugello, Portimao, Imola, other tracks make a one-off appearance here, produce great racing? Is this something where we could see Formula One start doing more, where we start seeing Formula One doing more races at different venues each year?
Yes, I think that would be a wonderful idea if we were able to see rotating tracks because as we saw this year with all the changes we saw in the schedule this season because we couldn't go to certain tracks because of the pandemic, I think it'd be a great idea if we were able to have rotating tracks. Portimao, really like Mugello, the Bahrain Outer Circuit, the Almost Oval. I think if we were able to rotate those races in the schedule every other season. I think that would be wonderful because we saw that Formula One's been missing out on some great tracks all across the world. But I do think that we need to keep some tracks on the schedule, permanently. Like obviously the Monaco Grand Prix, the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa-Francorchamps, races like that, Monza. I think those tracks need to stay on the schedule no matter what. And then other tracks, I think we can rotate like with Bahrain. I think one year we can run the regular Bahrain the full Formula One Grand Prix circuit, and then the next year switch back to the Almost Oval, and keep rotating each year. And I think that would be really good and give fans a different perspective on the track, and maybe one of those tracks I mentioned, like Mugello, Portimao, track Imola, tracks that we saw come on board this season to replace what we were originally supposed to race at. I think we might see one of those next season, because if you look at the Formula One calendar, there's still one race weekend that they haven't decided where Formula One's going to be racing. So certainly, I think it's supposed to replace the Vietnamese Grand Prix. That's not going to happen next year, and we could certainly see one of those tracks slide into that slot.
Yeah, we could definitely see some tracks slide into that spot. Of course, the pandemic, we know vaccinations efforts are underway, but we can still see issues that are going to change the schedule, especially March, April, May. I think those are going to be the critical months. I can only imagine Formula One has plans, but definitely after 2020, seeing Portuguese Grand Prix return back, the almost oval race. These were all producing great racing, and definitely I think a lot of fans will love to see. And it just seems like a good business idea. Have where annually you have 3, maybe 4 dates that go to a different track. So that way we may not have the Portugal Grand Prix every year, but was there every 2 years? That'll be huge. Every 3 years even. Better than just not coming to Portugal since I believe it was 1994 the last time they raced there, or 95. So it's been a long time. Nürburgring, that was a very popular race. We haven't been there. In fact, no driver besides Kimi Räikkönen and Lewis Hamilton raced at that venue until this year. So it's definitely, I think, a big move for Formula One. Get Formula One to more venues to reach more audience and just continue the history. Of course, they always have the Grand Prix names, the record books. It's just really sad. Like a good example, the Argentina Grand Prix has been raced since 1994. They were to come back every 3 or 4 years there. That'll be huge for the people there and for other venues to hopefully host Formula One. And with besides Formula One, of course, we know they're going to have a new support series for their race weekends as well.
Yeah, the much anticipated 2021 W Series season is taking shape, and the first 18 drivers were announced earlier this week. And Jamie Chadwick, the defending W Series champion from 2019, will return to defend her championship. And then 10 drivers from 2019 and all are going to be returning. And 8 rookies were named to the 2021 W Series season, including Belen Garcia, which we interviewed on Grit Girls, the women racing to win, and you can find the link to that in the video description below. And we still have 6 more drivers who are to be named for the 2021 W Series season. Do the veterans have an advantage over the rookies this upcoming season?
That's a really great question. I know we talked a little bit about this on Grid Girls, the women racing to win, Daniel and I. What makes a W Series very unique is that all the drivers are randomly assigned a chassis, a car, and a crew at each race. So there's really no advantage of building a chemistry between you and your engineer, recognizing what each chassis does, because you're going to get a different one. Essentially, there's going to be 24 vehicles out there. The chances of you getting a repeat chassis very, very slim. So the drivers like Jamie Chadwick, the defending champion, Sabree Cook, Alicia Powell, when they're come back, they don't have that experience when it comes to the chassis. If they were to get a mechanic crew that they worked with back in 2019, that might be a slight advantage. But now, with these 8 races, none of them were a part of the 2019 season. So, new car, new crew, new track. This is going to be a really wide open, very competitive season. I think it's going to be one of the most unpredictable series this year.
Yeah, certainly it's going to be quite unpredictable, and we know that Sabree Cook was the only American listed so far to compete in the W Series in 2021. Shea Holbrook raced in 2019, but did not automatically qualify this time around. And 6 other Americans have attempted to race in the W Series, but didn't land the ride. I think 2 of them might have been, Natalie Decker from NASCAR and a rising young stock car racer, Tony Bradinger, if my memory serves me right. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, Joe. But here's my question. Will we see another American added to the W Series grid? And how could 2 Americans draw U.S. crowds?
You are correct with Tony and Natalie. They both attempted to get in. Natalie, I believe, got to essentially the second to last round before she was given didn't make the final cut. To have more Americans in any racing series is huge. I know that's one of the efforts Red Bull originally had was try to get American into Formula One. You have an American athlete in any sport that no American has been in, American audience will follow. We have one in the W series, say Bree Cook. People are going to be following her, especially when they come to Coda. To have two on the grid, that will be really big for the American audience. Because definitely it's going to get it where, okay, it's not just one, there's two. You could definitely be marketing both of those drivers. Both of those drivers could be doing events promoting the W Series in the United States. And definitely, I feel especially the W Series has potential to really grow, and the interest, a super license is now part of this W Series. That's huge for these women that are racing. We could easily see, I think, the chances of a W Series driver landing a ride in Formula One increase after 2021. And definitely, it's going to be really interesting, of course, to see who are going to be the final six drivers to be named. I assume it might be one American, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting when we see another American race in the W Series. I think American presence will definitely draw in more people from the United States. And actually, I remember when Haas F1 made its Formula One debut, and been on Twitter at the time. I'll never forget people saying like from the United States at the season opener in Melbourne, Australia. A lot of people were saying like, "I'm only watching because this is an American team from America racing in Formula One." And that certainly drew a lot of people to become more interested in Formula One because we had a team from our own country racing in the pinnacle of motorsport, and for the same reason, I think if we see another American driver race in the W Series, that's definitely going to bring more attention to that series from the United States.
Yeah, it's going to bring more attention from the United States. And one of the big things, of course, when it comes to the United States is how often we see a former Formula One driver race here. A lot of you will say not that often. That was a point from Chris Medlin from Racer.com. He wrote an interesting opinion piece that caught our attention, especially Formula One drivers who view Formula One as the only racing option, failing to look at other series outside of Formula One. Sometimes, when a driver's Formula One career ends, they'll go race in other series such as IndyCar, Formula E, IMSA, or FIA World Endurance Championship. For others, they do whatever they can to stay relevant in the Formula One world, even that means being a test or reserve driver with no planned racing events. Millen argued that those drivers should strongly consider racing elsewhere if they don't find a seat the following season. Kobe, is the Formula One or nothing at all a good mindset?
Well, understand these drivers' commitments to want to be in Formula One. A lot of these drivers have been working their entire lives to make it to the pinnacle of motorsport and to have one of those 20 seats on the Formula One grid. But also at the same time, I don't think that's a good mind. I don't think it's good to be in that mindset. Be closed-minded about racing in other series. But yeah, and I remember Sergio Perez. It seemed like he wasn't interested in racing elsewhere if he didn't find a seat in 2021 that he probably was going to sit on the sidelines for a year. But luckily for him, he's going to be back on the grid in 2021, so there's nothing to worry about. And I do feel like that we have there's a lot of talent on the Formula One grid that we haven't seen for obvious reasons. If you're driving for a back marker in the midfield, you can't really show what you are truly capable of. The car can only take you so far. And I think if we saw some of those drivers, be like, hey, I'm not gonna be in Formula One this year, so I'm gonna do something in the meantime. If we see them like go over to IndyCar, Formula E, or endurance racing in series where the gap is not as big in terms of performance, we can truly see what they can do. And for a lot of those drivers, they haven't won anything since their junior careers in like Formula Three, Formula Two, since they were trying to come up to make it to Formula One. So I think if they were to get if they didn't have the all in on Formula One mindset and decided to go race somewhere else for a year, then maybe they'll get that old taste of winning. back in their system, and it'll make them feel really good. And for some, they might decide to stay out in that series so that they can be competitive and continue to go compete for wins and championships. And I do understand why they're in the Formula One or nothing mindset though, because for a lot of these drivers, once you're out of Formula One, you never come back, and that's definitely a scary feeling.
Yeah, a scary feeling indeed, especially Formula One. As Kevin Magnussen said, this was his childhood dream, and that chapter is closing. Of course, that's sad for any athlete, where it's, I want to get to the National Football League, Major League Baseball, World Cup soccer, to say, that was the past. I got to move on. Realistically, it's not going to happen. It's just one of those things where it's something where definitely it's hard to accept. And being the pinnacle of motorsports, that's like trying to tell somebody, okay, the best you're going to get is the NASCAR Truck Series, not the Cup level. Cup level, Daytona 500, all sorts of big events. So definitely it's something where I think of Juan Pablo Montoya. You could probably tell the difference, the big differences between going to Formula One, the access, limited access for the fans, going to places like Monaco, and then NASCAR Cup Series, more fan access, and then you're in places like Martinsville. World of difference between Martinsville and Monaco. Now, of course, as you mentioned, Perez, he was looking at taking sabbatical in 2021, but of course he did land a ride, especially with his win at the Sakir Grand Prix, really helped him probably get that ride. But looking at some of the other drivers, Daniel Kvyat got replaced by Yuki Tsunoda at AlphaTauri. Recently, he said he's willing to be a reserve or test driver with the goal of hopefully returning back in 2022. No other words from Kvyat about other racing plans. However, look at Kevin Magnussen. He signed with Chip Ganassi Racing, Cadillac DPI full-time at IMSA. Also has an inspiration to be in IndyCar next year, and his Haas teammate Roman Grosjean is still deciding his future racing plans as he's recovering from burns to his hands, suffered on that horrific lap 1 crash in Bahrain. Before the crash, Grosjean was looking closely at IndyCar, especially with IndyCar making some of the safety advancements. We saw how Jimmy Johnson now came into IndyCar. Alex Albon, we mentioned that he will stay in Formula One with Red Bull as the reserve driver. We're not sure if he'll race outside of Formula One in 2021 or if Red Bull will allow him. With that said, is it a big risk to race in another series, especially if you eventually have to go returning back to Formula One?
Yes, definitely. Like I mentioned, it's a scary thought. Spend a year out of Formula One and go and race in another series, and it actually makes me think of with Marcus Ericsson's rookie year in IndyCar when he was with the Smith Peterson Motorsport, which is now Arrow McLaren SP. While Marcus Ericsson was racing in IndyCar, he stayed on board with Alfa Romeo as as their test and reserve driver, just so he could keep that foot in the door in Formula One. And he ended up missing the race at Portland that year because he got called up to be there at the track, and the Formula One duties came first. He thought he might have a chance to race there, but ultimately he just ended up just standing around and just mingling in the paddock. And yeah, I do think it's a good idea if you try to keep a reserve or a test role with the option to race elsewhere, because you can, because while you're sitting around waiting for for another opportunity to race in Formula One, you can be out there being competitive in another series. You can be racing in the IndyCar series instead of struggling to try to finish in the points in Formula One. You can be in the streets of St. Pete at the season opener, fighting for a spot in the top five. And if a late race caution fall your way, you could be in contention to fight for the win, or you could win the historic Long Beach Grand Prix. You get to try out oval race and get to compete in the Indianapolis 500, the greatest spectacle in racing. There's just so much out there outside of Formula One, and I do agree that it's a huge risk to race in another series, especially if you aren't able to find a reserve role. But honestly, if you're just a test and reserve driver who's not doing any racing, and I think sometimes it can be a waste of a year out of your career when you could really be doing something great in motorsports and truly enjoying yourself. So I'm not sure what Alex Albon's situation is at Red Bull as a test and reserve driver. I don't know if it's in his contract where he can, let's say, go find a seat for the 24 hours of Le Mans. If someone's struggling early on in the Formula E season, he might be able to replace them. or even make some select starts in IndyCar to get a taste of that kind of racing. But 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 all in all, it's a major risk to race elsewhere, but it's definitely not the end of the world. We saw the situation with Brendan Hartley and what happened to him. He was a part of the Red Bull driver development program, and he got dropped, years ago. And went and found a home in endurance racing. Red Bull noticed him years later. He got called up to a race at, at what is now AlphaTauri. Ended up getting dropped again. So it's definitely not the end of the world if you go race outside of Formula One.
Definitely not the end of the world if you race outside of Formula One. The big thing I think of, especially with these drivers, I recall an interview in which Michael Schumacher on 60 Minutes, they asked him, will you consider racing the Indianapolis 500? And he said no, because of the dangers of racing with the concrete walls so close. For a driver, especially in Europe, where they don't have the experience in oval racing, when it comes to racing in the United States, just about every series you are racing so close to that concrete wall. You don't have the same FIA grade 1 tracks like you do in Europe. So definitely it's something where it is a big risk, but I understand part of it too is they don't have the experience, they don't feel comfortable. So at the end, I do understand when a Formula One driver says it's Formula One or nothing. There's also, of course, sports car, WEC, other series. In recent years, we've seen drivers like Marcus Ericsson drop from Alfa Romeo, went to IndyCar. Essentially, he was the reserve driver. As you mentioned, he missed that race in Portland. A couple months ago, he signed a multi-year contract extension to remain in IndyCar's Liz Ganassi to stay for the foreseeable future. Fernando Alonso, he took a F1 sabbatical, competed in the Indianapolis 500 for a second time, win the Rolex 24 and 24 Hours of Le Mans, and he competed in the Dakar Rally. Stoffel Van Dorn, Formula E, joined the Mercedes teams there. Brendan Hartley, as you mentioned, went to endurance racing after his stint with AlphaTauri. So definitely we're seeing a lot of drivers like Felipe Nasser, like many others I've mentioned, leave Formula One and win championships at other series, including IMSA. Do you think all F1 drivers need to have a plan B when their time is up?
Yeah, it's definitely important to have a plan B, not just Formula One, but in any situation. I do understand, like you said, why it's Formula One or nothing for a lot of these drivers. This is what they've been trained to do their entire life, and they've been trained to be Formula One drivers. So this is basically all they know. And as when you're looking outside of Formula One, that's when life gets really uncomfortable because you don't know what the other racing series are like. I mean, some of them probably follow other series, but they never imagined racing there. And we saw Felipe Nasr. He he left Formula One. He went on to become a champion in IMSAs. Doing great in that Cadillac DPI with Action Express Racing. And also Nasr's trying to get into IndyCar as well. So sometimes when you leave Formula One, you can find a great deal of success just like that, and also Brendan Hartley as well. I lost out on his chance to Formula One, went to endurance racing, did extremely well, got noticed, got his Formula One dream came true, and went out again. But I do think having a plan B it would be a smart idea in this situation, and that goes for drivers in all disciplines of racing. As you see, looking at IndyCar, we know Oliver Askew was out at Arrow McLaren SP after that first year, due to some unfortunate circumstances. And Askew was quoted saying that his IndyCar career might be over, and that's really stunning considering when he was coming up through the road to Indy ladder system and winning the championship and Indy Lights with Andretti Autosport. We thought Askew was destined to be a star in IndyCar racing, and now it looks like that his IndyCar career is definitely up in the air at the moment. And Askew has a plan B. He's going to be running the Rolex 24 in an LMP3 entry, and he said for now he's going to focus on sports cars. And if Askew wants to try to come back to racing the NTT IndyCar series, I think a smart option. I think he's doing it right. Run sports cars this year. Keep your name out there in the racing world, stay relevant. And if he wants to come back to IndyCar, I think the best thing that he could possibly do is try to focus on getting a competitive ride for the Indianapolis 500 in the month of May.
Yeah, with Oliver Askew, of course, that was very unfortunate. definitely decided I'm going to go focus on sports car racing. Juan Pablo Montoya, I mean, we've seen him go from kart, win the Indy 500, Formula One, come back, he done Indy cars, won a second Indy 500, competed in NASCAR, had success there. And a lot of people see him as one of the best drivers in the world because of his diversity of able to win in different series, NASCAR, IndyCar, kart, and Formula One. If he had just done IndyCar, well, kart, Indy 500, Formula One, people will still say he's a great driver, but not on the level where he is held today. And of course, he's now racing sports cars. He does the 24 hours of Le Mans. He'll be racing at that race. So he could potentially maybe get a shot at becoming a Triple Crown winner. Now, time for some quick takes.
Right, Motorsports will return to the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championships GTD category with an unchanged driver lineup. Patrick Long and Ryan Hartwick are back full time in the number 16 Porsche 911 GT3R. Jan Halen's in for the Enduros, and Klaus Bachler completes the lineup for the Rolex 24.
2021, we'll see a West Coast swing in the NTT IndyCar Series due to the pandemic and the restrictions in the state of California. The Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach has been postponed from spring of 2021 to September. That means the NTT IndyCar season will end the season at Long Beach. This means the 2021 season is going to have a 3-race West Coast swing starting with Portland International Raceway, Laguna Seca WeatherTech Raceway, and Long Beach. The California restrictions will also affect IMSA as well. Initially, IMSA was planned to race at Long Beach around the spring as well. That has to be changed to September. IMSA will race at Laguna Seca September 12th, then Long Beach on the 25th. And on Grid Tonight, we'll have more about this story.
Yesterday, the 2021 ARCA Menard Series West schedule was released, and with March 12th kicking off the season at Phoenix Raceway, then Sonoma, Irwindale, and Colorado National Speedway is carrying the series through June, June through August, and then September. They're going to be racing on the road course at Portland International Raceway, and Portland is the home for Grid Network and the Grid Ranking. And then we'll finish up the season. Las Vegas All American Speedway September and October, and the season's ending on November 6th. Another race at Phoenix Raceway.
The ARCA East Series was announced as well with the West Series. February 8th, the season will kick off at New Smyrna Raceway. Then we have 5 flag speedways, the fairgrounds at Nashville, Dover, and Southern National Motorsports Park. After that, they finish up the second at Iowa, the Milwaukee Mile, and season finale on Bristol, September 16th.
JDC Miller Motorsports will enter the 2021 IMSA season with an all-French driver lineup that includes some familiar faces. Tristan Vautier and Lloyd Duval will compete for the championship, sharing the number 5 Mustang sampling Cadillac DPI, and AJ Foyt Racing IndyCar driver Sebastien Bourdais will return to the team but scale back to an endurance role after he ran for the IMSA championship this season. Yet Bourdais is returning to IndyCar full-time in 2021.
Connor Daly will be returning to Ed Carpenter Racing full time in 2021, driving number 20. As always, Carpenter will run the oval races, daily, the road, and street courses, very similar to Jimmy Johnson's schedule as well. Like this year, Daly will run a 3rd ECR entry at the Indianapolis 500. The United States Air Force will return as sponsor. No word if Daly will return to Carlin Racing for the remaining ovals to compete the entire IndyCar season.
Newly crowned NASCAR Cup Series champion Chase Elliott was announced that he'll be joining Action Express Racing number 31 Wheeling Engineering Cadillac DPI lineup for next month's Rolex 24 Daytona, and Elliott will make his sports car racing debut trying out a brand new discipline in motorsports. He'll be a part of a strong driver lineup which consists of Felipe Nasr, Pippo Durrani, and Mike Conway. Action Express Racing is also running an all-star Cadillac DPI lineup for the Rolex 24 with 7-time NASCAR Cup champion Jimmy Johnson bringing sponsorship from Ally Financial to support the number 48 Cadillac DPI. Simon Pagenaud, Kamui Kobayashi, and Mike Rockefeller will share the car with Jimmy Johnson.
Some unfortunate news. Sherry Pollock's cancer returned. Sherry Pollock, of course, is the longtime girlfriend of NASCAR Cup Series driver Martin Truex Jr. She revealed the sad news that her ovarian cancer had returned. Pollock said it is in stage 3C of recurrent ovarian cancer. She underwent successful surgery to remove 3 visible tumors. She promised to fight this battle once again. On behalf of everyone in the Grid Network, we wish her, as well as Martin Truex, the very best in this journey against cancer. Always a difficult time, but definitely I know us here at the Grid Network and everyone worldwide are thinking of them.
Yeah, definitely sending Sherry and Martin Truex Jr. some well wishes during this time. Really unfortunate situation. We hope Sherry able to fight once again. And here at Grit Network, we're hashtag Sherry Strong. And before we end our program today, we wanted to remind you, be sure to visit Paw Bless, a dog accessories and clothing website. 10% off every purchase goes towards taking care of dogs that are homeless and ill. Click on the link below to receive a 10% discount on your purchase for being a loyal Grid Network viewer. And also comment, like, and subscribe to Grid Network on our YouTube channel, and look at the upcoming schedule for the following week. Our next program is going to be Grid Tonight on Wednesday, as always. Then Thursday, Grid Girls, the women racing to win. On Saturday, a brand new episode of Life on the Grid. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. And shout out to our Colin, our Patreon supporter. If you want to continue investing in Grid Network, be sure to check out our Patreon page. We're really excited to continue growing our program as 2020 comes to a close. Preparing for 2021, we're looking to grow even more and take this program to a entirely new level. And for Joe Samniego, I'm Kobe Lambert from NapoleonFitness.net. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful weekend.
Joe Samniego here. Want to invite you to go check out Pawbliss. Pawbliss is a dog clothing and accessory company based in Austria. 10% of each of your purchases goes to helping dogs in need, whether it's homeless, sick, or ill dogs. This is one of the reasons why we support it. Kiska here is a rescue dog from rural Alaska and our Grid office dog. We care about our furry buddies, and we know you do as well. So definitely check out pawbliss.com. There's a link on the video description, and by clicking on that link, you get a 10% discount on your purchase as well.